All right, 5.3 part 2. We are still finding the solutions, so we're still solving these trig equations. For 5a and b, we have to square both sides. So squaring cosine x plus 1 gives us a FOILed out equation, and then plus sine squared x. And we are only looking in the interval 0 to 2 pi on this one as well. All right, I want all of these to be cosines, so I'm switching sine squared x to 1 minus cosine squared x by the Pythagorean identity. And then I'm going to move 1 minus cosine squared x to the other side. So adding cosine squared x and subtracting 1, setting it equal to 0 so that I can factor and find my two answers. Setting the two factors separately equal to 0, I find that x equals pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. You'll need your unit circle again. And then when cosine x equals negative 1, that is when x equals pi. Right, since I'm just in the interval 0 to 2 pi, I don't have to put that plus 2 pi in. All right, same thing for letter B. Right, for number 6, we've got something a little different. So add 1 to both sides, and then we'll divide by 2. Now usually we just have like a cosine x equals 1/2, but this time we have a cosine 3t equals 1/2. So I'll set that whole 3t as if it were x equal to whatever angle gives me an x value of 1/2 on the unit circle. So that's at pi over 3 and 5 pi over 3. All right, I want to solve for t. Oh, I forgot my plus 2 pi in because this one just said solve. It didn't give me an interval. Remember, that means that the period of cosine is 2 pi. Right, but now I divide by 3 to get just an answer for t. So t equals pi over 9 plus 2 pi over 3 times n, or 2 pi n over 3. It doesn't matter how you write it. And then t equals 5 pi over 9 plus 2 pi over 3 n. You can probably hear Otis sneezing and shaking right now. All right, for letter B, you're going to add root 3 over 2 to both sides. And then sine is root 3 over 2 at pi over 3. And I already put the plus 2 pi in. And it also equals that at 2 pi over 3. Right, so 2x equals those two equations, divide by 2. So x equals pi over 6 plus pi n, and x equals 2 pi over 6 plus pi n. And then I went ahead and reduced 2 pi over 6 to pi over 3. Alrighty, letter C. Add 1 to both sides. So tangent of x over 2 equals 1. So tangent is 1 when x over 2 equals, this is pi over 4 plus pi n. So tangent has a period of pi instead of 2 pi. Multiply both sides by 2, so you'll distribute that 2, just like we divided everything by 3 or by 2 in the last couple examples. You get x equals pi over 2 plus 2 pi n. Letter D, solving this one, we want to divide by 3 on both sides. Alright, so now we're looking for when tangent is -1. So x over 2 equals 3 pi over 4 plus pi n. And then again, we have to multiply by 2 on both sides. Alright, I went ahead and reduced. If you multiply 3 pi over 4 times 2, it would be like a 6 pi over 4, which is 3 pi over 2. Alright, for letter E, it's different. Looks like I'm going to have to factor, but I want them being the same. So I'm looking for two tangents. Since secant squared x is squared, I know it has a Pythagorean identity, so I'm going to switch that one over to tangent. And I'm going to combine my like terms. And then I always change these over into just x squared minus 2x minus 3 because I think that is easier to factor. And then I'll switch it back to tangent once I get it factored. So tangent of x minus 3 times tangent of x plus 1 equals 0. Whoops, made a little mistake. Alright, and then I'm going to set those two factors equal to 0 and solve them. Alright, that first one, when does tangent x equal 3? We don't know that on the unit circle, so we're just going to put arctan, which if you remember is the inverse of tangent. So arctan of 3 equals x. It was also written tan, the little -1 of 3. Either way. I do know where a tangent equals -1. That was in my last problem. So that must be 3 pi over 4 plus pi n, and then I realized I forgot my plus pi n over on the other one. Alright, you need to include the period with the n to show that it keeps going around and around the circle. Alright, this time they're already alike. I'm just going to move the 6 over and get it set equal to 0 before I factor. Using your little trick as always. I almost forgot to divide by 4. So I gotta back up. Divide the 4 back into both of those using your little trick. Alright, now I switch it to tangent. So tangent x plus 2 times 4 times tangent x minus 3 equals 0. We set both of those factors equal to 0 and solve them separately. Again, I don't know when tangent equals -2. That's not a normal one that we get. So it's going to be arctan of -2 plus pi over n. But I think they both turn out, yeah, they do. They both turn out to be ones that we don't know right off the top of our heads. Right, so I also don't know when tangent x equals 3/4. So I'm going to say x equals the arc tangent -2 plus pi n, and x equals arc tangent of 3/4 also plus pi n. All right, the last two require a calculator, and if you still have no idea where your calculator is, I downloaded an app on my iPhone called Calculator X, and it's basically a graphing calculator. So you can try to use that. It has a y equals button. You can look at graphs. So hopefully, oh, you have to, some features of it you have to upgrade. I was just looking at it. But it might be helpful for you if you don't have your graphing calculator. Maybe there's an internet application where you can plug things in like this. You're going to need to plug in y equals 2 sine x minus x to get everything over on one side, and then change the 0 for y. And then you can solve that by seeing where the graph hits 0, and those will be your answers for x. So you just move everything to one side of the equation, plug in into y equals 2 sine x minus x, and use the function calc 0. And then you'll have to move it to the left of the 0 and to the right of the 0, and it'll find the 0 in the middle, so where it hits the x-axis. Right, and then you'll have to round because it's usually quite a big decimal. So it was negative 1.90 and positive 1.90. I think it was really like negative 1.89555 or something like that. And then it also hits at x equals 0. So you are only finding the zeros between negative pi and pi. So that means you're only looking where x is from negative 3.14 to positive 3.14. You don't have to go any further. All right, doing the same thing with letter B. And you should find that x equals negative 2.13 and x equals 1.25. All right, hope this helps. Have a great time doing your homework.